All right, hacking high school, rethinking the teenage years. I originally was going to entitle this talk, Just Don't Do High School. And for some reason, my chief marketing officer vetoed that suggestion. So we worked it around a little bit and came up with this idea of hacking high school. And this really is a continuation of the talk called Cultivating Language Arts Preschool through High School. And here you will see the last slide of the first presentation with all of those things: speech and debate, mock trial, logic, rhetoric, Socratic discussion, drama, musical theater, college, dual enrollment, teaching younger children, start a business, and community involvement. And there's a picture of my second year debate club in California. Right in the middle, prettiest of the girls, I would say, is my daughter, Fiona, who is now in medical school. And on the far left is Diane, who was a very good friend. She's, I think, a mom of 4 with one on the way, homeschooling. Next to her, Denise, she's still in California, homeschooling at least 3 or 4 kids. The very tall guy on the right is now a Catholic priest. His younger sister, who's right under him on the far right, is a teacher of nursing. She got her master's in nursing, and so she's operating at a very high level there. And the other kids I kind of lost track of, but it's so much fun to see your children and their friends who you know well grow up and be adults, and see them, you know, the seed you planted, the skills you hoped they would develop, the things they would value, you hoped that your work with them would do that into fruition as adults and parents and professionals and all that. So I wanted to start with speech and debate, and an extension of that would be mock trial. And one of the things that I love the most about speech and debate is that it is a perfect integration of all of the things you're really seeking to develop at a very high level. As I mentioned before, our language arts of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, they kind of culminate in thinking, and all of that is essential to being successful in competitive speech and debate. Now, there are 2 organizations that I have experience with. One is the NCFCA, which stands for National Christian Forensics and Communication Association. They've been around a very long time. They actually were started by the same individuals who formed originally the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and then Patrick Henry College. And of course, Patrick Henry College, their mock trial team has won international competition year after year after year after year. So there's resources there at ncfca.org. Around the time that I moved to Oklahoma, the California clubs of NCFCA kind of wanted to do their own thing. So they broke off and started their own league, which is STOA, S-T-O-A. This is not an acronym either. It is a Greek word meaning porch in front of a public building where people stand around and talk about stuff, basically, the STOA. And so this also is a Christian homeschool speech and debate league. And I think it's stoausa.org. Both of them are excellent. Some are stronger in some parts of the country than others. Right here in Oklahoma, we have both leagues operating. There's also the National Speech and Debate Association. I don't know much about them. They pretty much work in the world of public schools, and so I haven't much experience there. But all 3 leagues are very well organized, well structured. They have great educational components. And here are some of the reasons as to why I would strongly encourage anyone with children 12 and older to seriously consider doing speech and debate. The first would be research skills. What's interesting about speech and debate, if you go into policy debate, you generally get some really obscure thing that you don't know much about at all. And then you have to go and research about this thing. The first year I did this with these kids, the policy resolution was medical malpractice law in the United States should be significantly reformed. Okay, I didn't know anything, nor did I know anyone who knew anything about medical malpractice law. So this is something then you start to research and learn more, and then you go to a tournament and you come up against some case and some suggestion for how to reform medical malpractice law. You never heard that, so now you have to go research and figure out how you would counter that kind of case. And it's a funny thing when you take a small little thing, but you go really deep into it. You seem to learn a lot. I think much of our education was kind of the mile wide and a quarter inch deep experience. We learned a whole little bit about a whole lot of things. Then, of course, evaporation, right? And then we end up knowing almost nothing about everything. But when you go deep into something, well, then evaporation still happens, but you still know something. There's a chasm of knowledge and information left over. The other thing I noticed is that, in high school, we do subjects. So you have to take, history, or you have to take civics, or you have to take math or science, right? And you have all these subjects to take. But when you go deep into something that you have to know almost everything you can possibly learn about it, you end up learning the subject, right? You get into medical malpractice law, you learn the history of it, you learn the grammar of it, you learn the economics of it, you learn the politics of it, you learn the vocabulary. It's kind of like you're learning how to learn in a way that I never experienced when I was young. So it's very, very valuable that way. Organizational skills, you have a lot of information to keep track of. And when you go into a tournament, you have your case, an affirmative case you're going to run, but you have to go negative against other people's affirmative cases. So you have to collect up information that you can use to argue against other people's cases. And one of the things I love about it is that it really helps kids understand there are always two sides of an argument, because they may have a case and say, okay, here's my proposal, and argue it. And the very next round, they have to go in and go negative against a team running the same case that they were running affirmative. So they have to learn to argue both sides of every possible case or issue that could come up. Another year, this is so funny, another year, the resolution was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization should be significantly reformed or abolished. And I walked into my home one day, and I found 4 teenage girls in my kitchen, right? All like 14 to 17 years old, eating my chips and my guacamole, having a heated discussion about whether admitting Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia into the NATO alliance would alienate Russia and degrade Russian-American relations. This was almost 20 years ago. History may not repeat itself, but as Mark Twain said, it sure does rhyme. Another thing I would say particularly about the homeschool debate, is it's an incredibly positive, very, very uplifting culture. It's kind of like the opposite of a youth group. I don't know if you've had experience with youth groups, but you notice that teenagers will sometimes kind of sink down to the lowest common level of attitude and behavior and content and dress. And it's just not that great, even though it's maybe in a venue that's supposed to help them be better. This is exactly the opposite. These kids are dressed to the T's. They are polite. They are respectful. They are intelligent. They know how to interact with adults. They know how to interact with each other. They are polite. They are striving to be the best possible person they can be, because that's how you win debate rounds, right? You never win by being disrespectful or snide or disorganized or critical or condescending, right? So what happens in the speech and debate world is the kids are really in this position of younger ones have models to imitate, and they're imitating up, right? And the older ones know they have a responsibility to be a good example for the younger kids. And so this very broad range from about 12 to 18 of kids interacting with each other, and really everyone, for the most part, striving to be the best they can be. intellectually, attitudinally, spiritually, socially. So it's kind of the ultimate social environment. And there is, I will say, an element of it that errs on kind of pride. You get a little bit snooty, like, I'm really, really good at this. But that can happen in anything. I would say it happens worse maybe even in sports or other venues because the leadership of the organization and the parents involved try to, bring those kids down a notch when they need it. But if you are short on hope for the future, which is almost a continuous condition for me, just go to a homeschool speech and debate tournament and it will blow your mind because you will see young people, 15, 16, 17, doing stuff that you could never do. As long as you live, you could never do it as well as they do it. And organized, articulate, thoughtful, critical thinking in the best possible sense of the words. So another thing that I see going is this teamwork approach. Policy debate is two people on two people. So you have a partner. Lincoln Douglas debate is one-on-one, but most everybody's part of a club. And so the club will then organize various tasks like, okay, you guys go research this negative brief, you guys go research this negative brief, and you divide up the work and you come back together. And just the way they would support and love each other. And unlike team sports that can kind of be a we won or we lost kind of emotional teeter-totter thing, when these clubs have groups that go and some people win in this event or don't win in that event, there's this really sense of, okay, we're really supporting, we're here for each other. It's very, very, it makes me happy. I'll just put it that way. It makes me very happy. And you can go to a tournament. They usually start up in January because the kids prepare in the fall and start competing in the new year in the spring. And you can go and bring some kids if you want, or just go yourself. They will immediately recruit you to be a judge because they need judges. And you don't have to have any experience. They'll give you a little orientation, and then you get to go in and you can judge policy debate, values debate, or one of the many speech categories they have. The speeches are divided into three general groupings. One would be prepared speeches. These are written, memorized, and delivered. Things like persuasive speech or expository speech. Then there's another category of interpretations. This is where there's literature. It's excerpted and organized, and then essentially they act out the literature piece. There's even duo interps where two kids work together, but there are certain rules they have, and they still do it in their suits and nice clothes. So there's no costuming or props involved. So it's kind of a different type of drama, but it's really fun. There's humorous interp, duo interp. A lot of these kids will make you either just laugh or cry. Then there's limited prep speeches, which would be things like impromptu, where you have 2 minutes to prepare and give a 5-minute speech on something that you picked at random off the table, a quote or a statement or a word. There's also apologetics, where you pick a question from a list of 200 questions from Christian apologetics, and you have to speak on that. And then there's extemp, where you have prepared by collecting up news on any number of different current events, and then you draw a question. You have a half an hour to prepare a speech from the research you've collected up on current events. So some of the kids, first year, they'll just do one thing, and then next year maybe do a couple things. And then some of these kids, by the end, they'll win like the Iron Man thing, where they do one of the debates and then 5 different speech categories things. So it's really quite an amazing thing. And I don't know a single student who grew up and did at least some speech and debate for at least a couple of years that wouldn't look back and say, that was one of the most valuable, most formative experiences of my youth. And it carries over into all areas of profession because it requires all of these very high level, highly refined communication and thinking skills. So I think if I had to pick one thing from the smorgasbord of the many things I'm going to suggest, I would put this on the top of the list. just because I have had such good experience. And 4 of my 7 children have done this. 2 were too old, and I didn't know about it when they were there. And then one of my younger ones said, no, I want to do something different. So, but the 4 that did, I think would all say that was hugely, hugely beneficial and impacting. So if you would like help teaching students public speaking, check out our Introduction to Public Speaking video course. In this course, your students will learn memorization strategies, presentation skills, how to listen and critique other people's speaking, and how to do 5 different kinds of speeches. All right, I talked a little bit in the talk on cultivating language arts about the importance of studying logic, because when you learn the tools of logic, you actually can begin to listen differently. You start to read differently. You look at what people are saying and say, okay, so what's their premises? Are these premises valid to begin with? What's their conclusion? Does the conclusion follow from the premises? And you really, in teaching logic, I actually just learned to listen, read, and think better. So I would encourage everyone, for no better reason than you learn to listen and read and think better, teach logic to someone. But the advantages of kids doing it is it's going to give them the upper hand. I think I would have been very, very happy to have an opportunity to study logic as a teenager. I didn't really, although I came across little things here and there that were kind of logic-y. But my real attraction was to war games. And I loved playing war games, I think, because of the need for strategy and thinking through. And, I loved chess because it was that discipline of looking at the consequences and the consequences of that and the consequences of that and thinking down line in this way. So there are some good curriculums to go with logic, also rhetoric. Rhetoric in today's world is almost a bad word. If you hear the word rhetoric in the news or somebody's podcast, most of the time it's in a negative context. Well, that's just rhetoric. Meaning, well, that's just someone trying to persuade us of something that's not true. So that's not true, right? I would say this about rhetoric. Rhetoric doesn't hurt people. People hurt people, right? It's a tool. And there was actually a debate among the early Christians. Should Christians study rhetoric? Reasons against rhetoric. It can be used for bad purposes. The sophists, the people who want to use logic and rhetoric to deceive. Reasons for. Christians, we have the best truth. We have the truth that transforms people. We should be able to use rhetoric better than anyone. And so it was settled on that side. And so our great tradition of rhetoric really builds from the ancients up through the medievals. And Aristotle has been studied, for a very, very long time and very seriously by people like, from Augustine up to Thomas Aquinas and beyond. So there are a couple companies that do sell curriculum with logic and rhetoric. There are many others. The ones I have personal familiarity with would be Classical Academic Press and Memoria Press. So I got going with this. I had a nice group of teenagers, my 2 youngest and their friends. And so I taught Traditional Logic 1, Traditional Logic 2, Material Logic, and Aristotle's Rhetoric. I did a 4-year sequence. And I don't know how much it did for the kids, but it changed me phenomenally. I became a better thinker and a better person for having gone through this. I also like to mention to people these ideas of logic and rhetoric. They fit in. You're probably familiar with the term liberal arts. Most people don't know what those words mean. Honestly, if you were to walk out in the streets of any major city and say, I study the liberal arts, most people would be totally confused. Is that what? A Bernie Sanders appreciation class? No. even people who think they know what they are would say, oh, liberal arts. That's that stuff like English and philosophy you can't get a job with, right? And the old joke, what did the liberal arts major say on his first day of work after finishing college? Yeah, would you like fries with that? Although last time I heard that joke, it was upgraded slightly. Would you like room for cream? Right, because barista's, a few notches above fry slinger. But what are the liberal arts? Well, first of all, let's look at the word liberal. Okay, it's from liber. It's the root from which we get both liberty and library. It actually means bark in its most remote form. Why? Because bark was what you could use to make paper to write on. And it was people who could read and write and enter into contract. They were the free people, right? And so the liberal arts were the arts of free people. That's where that word came from and exists. Now, what are the liberal arts? Well, there are 7 of them traditionally, and they go from the ancient all through the early and late medieval periods. They're divided into 2 categories. There's the trivium, or the meeting of 3 ways, trivia, the meeting of 3 ways, and the quadrivium, the meeting of 4 ways. The trivium is the collection of the 3 liberal arts which are qualitative in nature: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So they are the language-based, qualitative-based arts. The quantitative-based arts, the quadrivium, are arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. It seems a little weird, but I'll explain it briefly, and if you want to study this more, there are plenty of resources. Arithmetic is the study of number. Geometry is the study of shape. Music is the study of number in motion, and astronomy is the study of shape in motion. So the trivium and the quadrivium together give you the 7 liberal arts, and then there's the other categories. There's the servile, or arts of service, and then there's the practical arts, and that would include everything from medicine to horseshoeing, right? So the liberal arts are those things that free people had the freedom to study so that they would retain their intellectual and spiritual, if not also their physical freedoms. And then during the Christian period, in the medieval development in the West, the liberal arts would then qualify you to study the queen of all sciences, theology. And so that's where that all comes from. So when we step in and teach our kids grammar, we teach them logic, and we teach them rhetoric, we are in a great tradition of teaching them how to think, and we combine that with great books and Socratic discussion. And there we have really what some people call classical education today, but really what everyone just called education until about 150 years ago, right? I love having discussions with teenagers about literature. In fact, I will tell you that some of the best moments in my parenting, teaching life happened in book discussions with teenagers about some kind of good or great book that went down a far down rabbit trail. And then someone said something that just sparked this incredible illumination. So I would encourage you to try and do this. Be a part of a group, or if you don't have one, start a group. All you need is one of your own teenagers and a few other people's teenagers. And if you just say, we're going to do a great books group, they will join in. And then you got 4 kids, and you can do it with there. And so I have taught many different things. And here's the truth. You do not have to know everything about everything to teach it. This is, I would call it maybe the myth of professionalism. Like somehow you have to know a lot to teach it. Well, it might be better if you did, but it's not prerequisite. I started teaching Latin. I didn't know any Latin. I learned 3 steps ahead of the kids. I learned more grammar from teaching Latin than I ever learned from studying grammar. I started teaching logic. I'd never opened a book that had logic as the title, but I learned right along with my students. And I even taught crazy stuff that I totally didn't understand. I taught Homer, I taught Dante, I taught Shakespeare. I didn't teach it so much as I just facilitated us reading it together and having a conversation. And I didn't understand it perfectly. They didn't understand it perfectly, But I finally realized, guess what? Nobody understands this stuff perfectly. It's just a question of who's less behind. And while I did it somewhat imperfectly, I would argue that doing it was way better than not doing it. So that's kind of that. I like the Cana Academy people. They publish these kind of worldview literature study guides that are very helpful. The Cersei Institute, also my very good friend Andrew Kern, they have a lot of great stuff in this area of rhetoric and Socratic teaching, as well as our course that we co-published with the Center for Literary Education, Adam Andrews, called Teaching the Classics. That'd be a good place to start. That was what I did. I just took his course. I actually didn't just take his course. I videotaped and then edited his entire course, which meant I got to watch it about 10 times. So I really understood it. And then I had the book and, just open a book. There's some questions, try a question. If it doesn't work, try a different question. And you get better and better at both learning how to ask questions and how to evoke from the students, how to elicit from them the ability to ask better questions. And I think if there's maybe one thing I would put very high up on the list of important things I would like my kids to leave home with, would be the ability to ask good questions about everything they come across. All right, so now how about drama? I love drama, and most kids do. In fact, right, or as soon as kids discover that you can make a play, they want to make plays. And if you have enough siblings, they'll try to do it together, or they'll get together with their friends and they'll make up a skit, or they go to summer camp, they make up a skit. And then the question is, how do you maximize the aptitude they have for this? What are some of the benefits of drama? Well, from a simple view, it's a lot of memorization. It's a lot of furnishing the mind with lines that have vocabulary and syntax, and oftentimes they're connected with history. Oftentimes plays are extracted from a great piece of literature. So we didn't really have this where we were. There was the community theater, but there were 200 people auditioning for every part, so you couldn't really do that. So I thought, well, let's start a group. So it was me and 2 other families, and we had 7 kids, and we did Cinderella. And it was the musical Rodgers and Hammerstein. I paid $500 for the rights, and we made costumes and rented a little theater, and I made one big mistake. I didn't charge anyone to see this play, so the whole cost of it came out of my pocket. But it was worth it. I learned my lessons. We all learned some lessons. And then we did another play. We did a musical version of Little Women. We doubled the size of the kids involved. We did another one I didn't like very much, Into the Woods. We finished up, I don't remember, we did a couple others. We finished up with Scrooge, with A Christmas Carol, the musical. I think we had 53 kids involved, not all in the cast, but doing a lot of the work in the backstage. It was so much work. I can't even tell you. The kids would have done it again and again. They would have, as soon as they finish, what's the next play? And the parents all were suggesting next year we will think about the next play. But for now, these things like debate, right? Socratic discussion, drama, they take a lot of time. And one of the problems in life is if you're doing one thing, you're not doing something else. So if you're going to get into debate or drama, or as we did crazily, both, right? It's going to require a tremendous amount of your time and a tremendous amount of your kids' time. So you may have to give short shrift to something else. I personally would prefer to give short shrift to something like a physics book and put the time that's available, the energy, the enthusiasm into something that's going to have more lasting beneficial effects on language and maturity and memory and cultivation and all of that. Okay, here's my real thing now, and this is why I wanted to call this Just Don't Do High School. High schools are just not very good places in most of the place. A lot of high school students are very bored and cynical. The kids who seem to do better are the ones that are in sports. because they've got something to do with other people that seems more real and meaningful. But for the most part, it's kind of as though it's just not real. And John Taylor Gatto, some of you may know Mr. Gatto, he wrote the book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Education. He wrote An Underground History of American Education, both very good books you could read. He taught 8th grade English in Brooklyn, New York for 17 years. He was the New York State Teacher of the Year and the New York City Teacher of the Year. And then he was the New York State Teacher of the Year again. He was, a great, great guy. But he said something once, I heard him say this, I thought that is so true. He said, what every 13-year-old in the world wants more than anything else is real, honest to God, meaningful life and death responsibility. And that is exactly what schools contrive. Sports and drama and competitions like debate. Now, how do we help kids move into an adult world? Well, right now, at this time in history, we have a tremendous opportunity called dual enrollment or dual credit. And that's where a high school age student can enroll in college classes. And if they complete these college classes, that grade, that credit, can go on both a high school transcript and a college transcript with transferable credits. Now, that may seem, oh no, 15-year-olds, how could they do college? Well, if any of you have any recent experience with college students, you would probably notice that the rigor level is decreased very significantly, and that a lot of kids at 15 or 16, if they're motivated, if they can read decently well, write decently well, and do a little bit of math without a calculator, they can usually walk into freshman level classes and do as well or better than most of the 19-year-olds that came out of the public system. Another thing that a lot of people don't know about college classes, especially in the first couple years, underclass classes, is the rigor level is the same as high school. So if you take chemistry in high school and you take one semester of chemistry, first year chemistry in college, it's the same chemistry, right? The only difference is in high school, they stretch it out over a year and you have to do 6 or 7 classes. In college, they compress it into a semester and you only have to do 3 or 4 classes. But it's the same stuff. It's not as though high school is a prerequisite for college. It's not true anymore. The only way in which that's true is the college admissions process that says you have to have a transcript and an SAT or ACT score. And then we decide if we let you in and take classes. But guess what? If you're 15, you don't have a high school transcript. If you're 16, you don't have to have an SAT or ACT score. And you can start taking college classes in this dual enrollment system in almost everywhere, any number of very good options, from local community colleges to major universities, to colleges or universities that have online programs. And I would say the average, I'm talking average 16-year-old homeschool kid that I meet can go in and write circles around the 19-year-olds in the classes. So there's no reason not to do it. Now, why should you do it? Well, number one, it's going to save a lot of time and money, right? So here's another dirty little secret. If you wait until a child finishes high school and then you enroll them in college, they will charge you full price minus whatever scholarships you can wrangle out of them. But as you know, scholarships are like Macy's discounts, right? They just raise the tuition and then give everybody a scholarship, right? Whereas on the dual enrollment, they very often will offer those credits at 1/4 to 1/10 of the cost of enrolling as a full-time student after you've finished high school. So you will save a lot of money. Another thing is, if you are living at home and you enroll in a college class, And let's say you do come up with something really goofy. You've got some professors pushing a particular political agenda, or the reading material is just off. Well, okay, if you're living at home and you detect this goofy thing going on, who are you going to talk to? Parents. If you're living in a dormitory at the U of blah, right, and you encounter some goofy thing, who are you going to talk to? The other 19-year-olds in a dormitory, who are not going to have much wisdom to bear on the situation, right? Another advantage is if you enroll in the class when you're in high school and you haven't paid that much money to begin with, and it isn't a good class, you can drop the class and you don't lose much. You go enroll in the state university, you commit yourself to, $3,000 for a class for the semester, right? You drop the class, you just lost $3,000. It's a much greater expense. So it's economical, it's practical. And what I have noticed is that it's a better social environment to go into college classes when you're either younger or older than everybody else. If you're 15 or 16, there's no way you're going to be as stupid as a whole room full of 19-year-olds. And if you're 24, there's no way you're going to be as stupid as a whole room full of 19-year-olds. The only way you become as stupid as a whole room of 19-year-olds is if you're also 19, right? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point I'm making here. So socially, it's often a better environment. So there are a few programs that are available that I like. There are a lot that I don't even know about. There are some pretty big schools that are doing this now. Liberty University in Virginia, they have an online enrollment that is about 4 times their in-person enrollment. And they've got it really organized. And they absolutely love dual enrollment homeschoolers. 2 reasons. Number 1, those kids do well in classes. So that makes their classes better for everybody, makes their numbers look better. And number 2, if you went and got a year or 2 of credits from Liberty University while you were in high school, what school might you go to continue your education? It's one of the best marketing ideas they've got. And there's not just Liberty, there's, Colorado Christian, Grand Canyon. There's a lot of schools now that are doing this, and they're very actively seeking to enroll high school age homeschoolers. Now, some schools will have like an age grade requirement. They will say, you have to be a junior. Well, you might say, well, my child's only 15. Skip a grade. Right? Who says you have to do 10th grade? Just skip from 9th to 12th to 11th. And now you're a junior. And now you can take classes. I mean, I skipped 2nd grade. I know someone who skipped 8th grade. There's actually a kid who just got a master's degree at 12 years old. I just heard it on the news. So it's not like this is a hard and fast rule. You just, decide what grade you're in. If you need to skip a grade, why not? Who's to say you didn't, right? All right. So the groups I like the most are Unbound. Their website is beunbound.us. This is an organization that takes basically kids 16, 17, 18, and up into their 20s. And it does 2 things. It creates communities and has courses they specifically offer on things like life skills, time management, worldview. They have a project-based curriculum, and they also use online accredited asynchronous, meaning you can do them at any pace you want, accredited college courses. So the kids who enroll in Unbound, they get community, they get projects that they do with a team, they get specialized courses that are extremely well constructed and valuable, and they bank college credits. So they could finish 2 years or 3 years of Unbound with probably an associate's degree worth of credits and all these other very positive things. And I had a chance to speak to some of the students in this organization, and I was mightily impressed with their maturity, their focus, their inquisitive nature, the high level of conversation and social interaction I observed at their gatherings. So I love that group. Another one we have a relationship with is Christian Halls International. This is christianhalls.org. The founder of this is Nick Ellis, one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He is a PhD from Oxford and taught ancient languages at Oxford, tutored for some time, and he loved the Oxford tutorial model. So he wanted to try and recreate that experience for kids, around the world. He's done quite a bit of work in Brazil. But the idea here is he's got an organization, Christian Halls, and they can essentially broker classes for groups of people. So you would say, I want to start a group. I've got, half a dozen teenagers. Okay. So you would get together. One adult would kind of be the mentor, the supervisor, the tutor, if you will. The kids would say, okay, let's look at the, courses we could take. And there's hundreds, maybe thousands available. And, it's way bigger than what any high school can offer in terms of variety. So maybe it's something mundane like English Comp. Maybe it's something a little, different like, accounting. Or maybe it's something that someone always wanted to study, ancient Egyptian history, right? I mean, there's classes in pretty much anything. So anyway, the kids would decide what classes they want to take, one or more, enroll with Christian Halls. Christian Halls enrolled them in the college program. They do the coursework, but they get together every week, talk about the texts, study together, maybe write papers and talk while they're writing their papers, do the homework, do the coursework in a group under the supervision of an adult. And then they get the college credits. Christian Halls banks the credits. And then if they want to, the next year or the year after, transfer into a bigger university, they have transferable credits. So it's all accredited. And that's where we were very excited when they came to us. Christian Halls came to us and said, well, we were looking for a very good English composition course. And we think yours is the best. And we have managed to arrange for your course, as it is, what we thought is a first-year high school course, to get a full year of grammar and composition from 2 different fully accredited universities, Southeastern University and Donnelly College. So that's a pretty good deal, right? You can do our thing anyway. Why not pay an extra $300 and get a transferable credits for it? So that's one group. Kepler Education is associated with the publisher Roman Roads Media, and they have both online for high school without college credit courses, which I don't know why anyone would do that, because they also offer online high school for college credit courses. And then many of you are familiar with Classical Conversations, and they have their CC Plus program where you can also get dual enrollment going on. So I tend to feel this is just an opportunity that it's almost dumb not to take advantage of it if you're so inclined, because it's very low risk, it's very high return. And for kids, especially if they were kind of homeschooled or went to school, to then say, okay, I'm in college level classes, that's like being grown up. That's like, okay, there's external accountability. This is a real thing. And that's actually very helpful, especially for homeschool moms, because at a certain point, your kids really don't want you to be telling them what to do all the time anymore. You've noticed this. They would rather tell themselves what to do, but they still need that accountability. And so they enroll in a class, and now you can be on their team. Help them be successful in the class rather than trying to make them do stuff. Do you see? So, I think we way, way underestimate the intellectual potential of teenagers, and we have been doing so for 60, 70, 80 years. But you think back, probably in 1930, a high school diploma was harder to attain than a bachelor's degree is today in most fields. And if you go way, way back, go look up, this is amazing. I believe, if I get my story correct, it is the Salina, Kansas 8th grade graduation exam from 1894. This is the way I found it. There's probably versions. Nobody I know, no college student anywhere could pass this test. The level of knowledge and mastery that was required to graduate 8th grade in 1900 was far more rigorous than what most college students face today at least in their first few years. So they can do it. The kids can rise to the occasion. So take a look and see how that might fit in with your future. Next, we have the idea of helping your teenagers learn how to teach younger children. Now, often this happens somewhat organically in a larger homeschool family because the mom needs the older kid to help teach the younger kids. But it's not formal, organized in the way that I think can be very, very beneficial. So I have always liked the idea of getting an older kid, 16, 17, and then helping set up a class for them to teach of kids in the two notches down. So in that 9, 10, 11-year-old range, because there's enough difference there that it's clear in the age authority picture that kids have about each other. And the best way to teach something, the best way to learn anything is to teach it. So I have for many years taken a couple of my top students and tried to coach them into teaching younger students in the community. The first time I did this, I thought, I have this girl who's really good at writing. I mean, I taught her a whole system. She aced it, mastered it, working on her own book. This kid knows. She could easily teach a group of 9 and 10, 11-year-old kids with our system very well. I'm totally sure of it. Because she's basically an adult. She's just a little younger than what you would think. So I set it up. And I said, would you do this? And I got the kids organized. And I said, use this material, and you know our system, and follow this schedule. And then I just kind of supervised it. And it was fantastic. The kids loved her. She loved the kids. It gave her this level of confidence. And I thought, this is so good. Let's do more of this. And so I did it with another of my top students. I taught Latin for 3 years. And then after the second year, I taught Latin for 2 years. On the third year, I took my top student and put her in charge of teaching a new first-year class. So she was in my third-year class, teaching the first-year class. So I had third and first going at the same time. Then the next year, I was teaching fourth year. She was teaching second year. Then the next year, I took the next top kid, who was now about 16. I put her in charge of teaching a first-year class, while I was teaching fifth, and the other girl was teaching third. So I had 3 sections of Latin, first year, third year, and fifth year, all going at the same time. And I was only teaching the small group of top kids, but I was helping and supervising, being sure everybody had the materials and was on schedule and all that. And those girls are just, a pride and joy to me because they did so well. And, it was a case where if you have a big enough community and you can get that going and supervise it, everybody wins. And quite honestly, I suspect these girls, they did a better job than maybe some of the other parents would have done if I tried to draft other parents. Why? Well, they were under the gun to do it well. They were prepared. They were organized. This was like a very important thing in their life. And so I think it worked out beautifully. So I would encourage you, wherever you can kind of set this up, whether you're in a school or a group or just an informal community like we had, see if you can't work in this idea of the top kids having a chance to teach something they know, whether it's writing or Latin or maybe math or maybe music or maybe art or dance or drama, to younger children. All right, what's our next idea? Start a business. Well, if you want to integrate language skills, and you want someone to have to listen and speak and read and write and think well, there's pretty much nothing bigger than starting a business to put that kind of positive pressure on someone to do their best. And I have long been a fan of small home businesses, side businesses, or helping kids get set up in a business. And there are many reasons beyond just the language development side. There's also that sense of, I really now am in the world of adults. I'm trying to sell stuff to adults. I have to really be the best that I can possibly be. I have to provide a service or a product to adults in the real world who are going to pay me. I have to be sure this product or service is of highest quality. And there's something that just drives it. Now, I am a little biased. I have always been very entrepreneurial. I started my first business when I was 16 years old. I was super into war games. And when I learned that you could buy wholesale and sell retail, and all you needed to do was have a license to do that, I thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard of. Because I didn't know anything about how it worked, but I thought I could buy all my gaming stuff cheaper. And I could buy more gaming stuff and sell it to my friends who are going to buy gaming stuff anyway and make money off them. So I had my little 1965 Chevy Nova, and I drove around with a trunk full of Napoleonic miniatures and naval miniatures and Avalon Hill games and war game supplies and Dungeons and Dragons and the whole thing. And I would roll up to a gaming party and open my trunk and got the goods, guys. So I've always been self-employed, and I've always been very interested in this. But, I think on a greater side, I would say that entrepreneurial thinking is very evangelical. It's very much like missional thinking, evangelical thinking, because what do you have to do in both cases? Well, number one, you have to put yourself out there. And putting yourself out there is a risk. You risk rejection. And it's good to be able to risk rejection when you're young and you're more resilient and you've got a support network. Okay, that didn't work. Try again. Try again. Keep trying. If you keep trying and then you get a success, then you believe you can succeed. And when you're young and resilient, you can fail a lot of times, but that one success can drive you to do that next thing and the next thing. And, why aren't we more evangelical? Why don't we share the good news with more people? Well, usually we're afraid that it will irritate them or that they will react negatively or it will bother them or somehow it will disturb them. And that's just not the right way to think. But if you think about that entrepreneurially, you make no money. So you have to do it. You have to be willing to take that risk. And I just think that is so very valuable. Another thing that you learn when you get into business of any sort is you work now for a reward later. That's called delayed gratification. And that, by the way, is the number one predictor of success in men, is having developed the ability to delay gratification at a younger age. In fact, I just heard on a podcast, super interesting study that looked at young children and their ability to not take a marshmallow for a certain period of time in order to get 2 marshmallows later. And then they tracked these kids 20 years later to see how they did. And the ones who could not take the marshmallow and wait were better in every area: academic, economic, professional. So if you've got particularly boys, you want to be thinking, how do we cultivate delayed gratification? I was so happy. My grandson this morning, he wanted to talk my ear off. They stayed at our house last night. And he comes up and he goes, okay, I just figured out, if I can work for Nana 2 hours a day for $3 an hour for 5 days a week for a year, I can make $1,450, which is pretty darn close math, which he all did in his brain. And then I can buy my horse and have enough money to feed it for a while. I mean, that's pretty long-term thinking for a 10-year-old, right? And so I was very pleased with that. He understands, work now, and then you get the benefit later. And really, that's what all of life is about, right? I mean, your courtship and your romantic life, it's all about patience now, benefit later, right? Education now, income later. Live now, eternity later. It's really the big picture of everything. So I do think that's good. I would encourage families to maybe consider a family business. guess what? Even if you don't make much money, the lessons you learn in the process will be worth more than the money you don't make. In fact, I have long thought that if you were to take the $25,000 you would pay for a kid to go to school for a year or two and just give them the money and help them start a business, even if they lost it all, they might learn more than if they went off to college and, watched football games and partied with the fraternity and took stupid classes, which is kind of what I observed. So this idea of doing it together, whether it's a big profit or not, is good. And even if it's this little thing, like you say to your 13-year-old son, let's start a window washing business. We'll just work on Saturday, and we'll make flyers, and we'll put them around the neighborhood, and we'll wash houses' windows for $100 a piece or whatever you figure you can get. And you just go out and do 2 houses on a Saturday, and you make $100, and you split it, right? That's big money to a kid. And what you're teaching by modeling that is hugely, hugely impactful. So we did publish for some time a little book called Lemonade to Leadership. We have discontinued publishing it in-house, but we did it on a print-on-demand thing on Amazon. So if you are interested in that, there are actually quite a number of curriculums on entrepreneurship for teens. So you might look into that and see, what does it take? Well, you have to have a business plan. So you have to think of, what are the things I could do and how would I do them and what will I need to sell that product or service to someone? How will I create communication? How will I get a website going? How will I then fulfill that? How will I deal with cash flow? And of course, the very important problem of how to pay taxes. All sorts of valuable things. So Lemonade to Leadership and other courses you can find pretty easily. And I did want to mention this idea of things like internships and political campaigns, volunteer opportunities, and mission trips. All of these 4 things fall into this category of things that teenagers can do that put them in the world of adults doing real things. And I believe that what I wanted at 15 or 16, more than anything else, was to be in the world with adults doing real things. School was just something that I had to do in order to have the freedom to do other things. For me, life began when school was over. And I had a lot, I don't know if they do it these days, but on my transcript, I had a lot of work experience credits. Because then you could get out of school as early as possible and go work at McDonald's or the pet shop or the game store. That's where real life started for me, was doing things with adults. I got a chance to race on yachts with adults. And that was also really good because, you have to quickly respond, take orders, know what you're supposed to do, think quickly, don't mouth off, right? So it's a good maturing, growing up process. Okay, last is this problem of transcripts. I get a lot of parents, their kids hit about 12 or 13, and if they're homeschooling, they start to say, but what about transcripts? Okay, so here's my attitude about transcripts. They don't mean that anyone actually learned anything. They mean you did time, right? I have a transcript. I have letters on the transcript. It doesn't mean I learned any biology or government or woodshop. I'm pretty sure I didn't learn any biology, and woodshop was a total disaster for me. I made the ugliest bowl that any human being ever made, and I hated it so bad. But I have a letter, it's probably a B right there, prove that I did it. So I don't believe that transcripts actually prove that anyone learned anything, right? So my attitude about high school transcripts, if you're homeschooling, is do whatever you want to do and then call it whatever you need to call it. This is the great freedom of homeschooling. You can make your own transcripts. Do the schools care? No, because they actually are aware that transcripts don't mean anything, right? So, now, but think about it. You could compare these 2 things. 300-page botany textbook. You slog through this thing and you take quizzes and tests in botany, and you say, I studied botany. And 2 months after that's all done, how much botany do you actually know? What? 5% if you're a genius? 2% if you're me? I mean, it's pew. But if you were to work in a garden, study which plants should go next to which plants to protect from which insects will come at which times, and which things you plant at what seasons in order to actually get vegetables. And you started to learn how hard it actually is to eke food out of the ground and not pay more in supplies than the tomatoes are worth, right? Wouldn't you learn a whole lot more actual botany? So I am of the belief that if you do more real things, you can call them whatever the transcript demands, but you end up with a better education in the long run. I was worried though, because isn't this a little bit crass to run around and tell people, do whatever you want and call it whatever you need to? So I asked my friend Lee Bintz. Lee Bintz had a company for a while called the Home Scholar, and her whole company was basically helping homeschool parents do high school transcripts and apply to colleges. And so I liked Lee a lot, and I had her on the podcast once, and I was a little nervous. I said, Lee, I say something to people, and I'm just wondering if this is in alignment with what you say to people, because maybe I'm off on this. And I told her what I said. Do whatever you want, call it whatever you need. She just goes, oh yeah, that's exactly what I say. And that's her business, right, is getting kids into college. And I even know some people whose kids have gone to military academies, which have probably the lowest acceptance rate of any schools. Very, very competitive. And what they really love to see are things that are not just the standard high school stuff. They love to see when kids have done these unique, different, interesting, challenging, real-world things. That's going to look a whole lot better. So, if possible, I recommend you just don't do high school. Instead, right, look for all the other possible ways that your child can move through those teenage years. And they will come out, I think, even more well prepared for higher education or entrepreneurial activity or ministry or career, whatever they choose to go into. There is one thing I should mention, that's the CLT. These are my friends at the Classic Learning Test. They looked at the College Board who produces the SAT and the ACT and realized these people are not just not good, they are doing evil in the world. And they are using their tests for political purposes and propaganda. And the content on these tests is specifically put in there to skew the way people think about things. And then everybody teaches to the test. We need an alternative to the College Board. And I don't know if you know this, but the president of the College Board previously was head of the Common Core State Standards Initiative. And before that, he was a senior consultant at Pearson, which is the Monsanto of textbook publishers. Their stated goal is to control the world, right? To control the whole world of English textbook publishing. And it's really so incestuous, it should be illegal. It's just ugly the way this is all set up. But how do you escape? Someone has to do something different. So Jeremy Tate said, thus far and no further, O evil force. And he started the Classic Learning Test. And they use excerpts from good and great books and historical documents, real stuff, for their language portion of their test. Then they have a math portion of their test. And it's by far a better test if you have to take one. And they've got now over 1,500 schools that have signed on to accept the CLT instead of the ACT or SAT. Some of these quite good schools like Hillsdale. I think Notre Dame is pretty close to going there. And then lots of other, schools. In fact, I would almost say that if the school won't take the CLT, I'm not sure I'd pay for that school, right? That would be my attitude, depending. So check out the CLT if you need to. And of course, we at IEW have all of our ways to help you in every way that we can with blogs and podcasts and newsletters and magalogs. And we have an awesome, awesome team. So if you ever have any questions about anything I've ever said or anything about any of our products you may or may not be using or want to use, or just any general question about teaching or homeschooling or schools or whatever, we have an incredibly experienced group of very competent, knowledgeable people who will answer your question, or if they can't, they'll kick it upstairs. And if they can't, they'll kick it upstairs. And eventually, I might actually have to answer your questions if they're too tough. But we love to serve and help. We are all really part of one greater, grander community that says, we can do our part in our little corner of the world to make our whole world a better place for everyone. And that's the most we can do. But it's always better if we can do it together. So thank you for being here.